better known as Fred Durst, Limp Bizkit's vocalist, is an icon in the rock industry. I mean, how could you go wrong with his legendary lyrics, emotional yet impactful vocals, signature red cap, and such a carefree attitude? While Durst's main claim to fame comes from his band and being somewhat of a meme, the musician has also dabbled in making movies, with 3 films he's directed under his belt: The Education of Charlie Banks, Longshots, and The Fanatic. So, in today's video, we'll be talking about all 3 films by giving the basic blueprints of their stories, critiquing each to understand their quality, and bringing up some other information I thought was interesting or valuable to my points. Before we do that though, I want to bring up what made Durst want to create movies in the first place. Here's the thing, Durst has always wanted to make movies, but of course, Limp Bizkit was where all of his fame and public appreciation would come from. In an interview with Real or TV, Durst explained he doesn't want to make blockbusters or be in bidding wars with movies. Rather, he wants to make timeless films that could be appreciated time and time again. It's an experience like no other, something even I understand. Putting a big production in motion, working on every single aspect, and then seeing the final product is just a special feeling, no matter what you've done. I will say though, the difference in budget between all my videos and Durst's movies is pretty big. And not to mention, don't you want people to watch your stuff if you feel it's of quality? Well, I guess Durst got money to burn, so props to him. Speaking of recognition, if you're a fan of rock or nu metal music, you may actually already be familiar with some of Durst's directing, as he directed a few Limp Bizkit music videos, and the music videos for Stain's It's Been a While and Korn's Falling Away From Me. Now, you might be wondering why you've never heard of Durst as a movie director before. You might think that's because most of his fame is from Limp Bizkit, but there's a lot of rock fans that know Rob Zombie for being both a musician and a director, so what's the deal? Well, all 3 of Durst's films did really bad at the box office, with each of them severely below their budget, with the exception of the Longshots. Not to mention, when I tried to look up some of the marketing and other promotional material for these movies, I didn't find much. So, of course, no one saw these movies or hardly remembers them. I actually learned of his directing career because of a meme my friend sent me from a nu metal base page. Look, I can understand Durst's stance on wanting to make good movies over profitable movies, but I don't know, you think he'd want to make some kind of money off of it, even if that means he breaks even. Anyways, I wanted to look into how Durst acted while directing his movies, but really only found one thing. According to the cameraman working under Durst during his first film, whenever something went wrong during a scene, Durst wouldn't yell out, "Cut!" like a normal director. Rather, he told the cameraman to keep rolling. Yeah, let's just move on. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's actually dive into these movies and give them a run for their money. Released in 2007, The Education of Charlie Banks is about the titular character, an awkward but smart and caring person, reminiscing over his college days with the main focus on another character known as Mick. You see, years before the main events of this movie, Charlie had Mick arrested for aggravated assault, but decided to drop the case after his friend Danny convinced him to do so. Mick stays with Charlie and Danny for some time during their college years, which has our protagonist on edge due to what he did to him years ago. There's also another character called Mary who Charlie has a crush on, but she ultimately gets real intimate with Mick instead, adding on to their conflict. They do a lot of crazy adventurous stuff together, and as such, the tension builds between Charlie and Mick, which eventually boils over. This film isn't so much a film in my opinion, rather an experience. You see, this movie seems to break certain film conventions and doesn't really seem to have some kind of central idea or message. And yes, I know, movies can break certain rules and expectations if they do them in an appropriate way, but I don't think Durst has the knowledge on how to do so, as indicated by this film and his 3rd movie, but we'll get there. Movies don't have to have the deepest of messages either, but they should have some kind of purpose for their existence, and I'm not sure why this tale had to be told. There's hardly any character development either. The only character development I can think of is Charlie says about little more than halfway through the film that he's no longer afraid of Mick, yet he's still kind of on edge around him. And Mick is sort of less evil after the intro, and even then, he's still a troublemaker, so. This film's boring too. Yes, I know, there doesn't have to be tension, conflict, or action every 2 seconds in a film for it to be good. Every piece of media needs to have some breathing room to pace itself and let characters speak for themselves. With that being said, it needs to have tension or action thrown in at appropriate times throughout, as to illustrate the stakes at hand, how the plot revolves around the protagonist and antagonist, and the chains of events that need to take place in order for the conflict to be concluded and wrap things up. A large majority of this film is just the three main boys and Marys talking to one another, with some drinking and partying thrown in, and a few tense scenes where Mick starts a fight with someone. I will say though, the few tense scenes did have me hanging on the edge of my seat. Like, it does get real uncomfortable sometimes. In other words, the pacing of events is too drawn out. There should have been more points of conflict to have more tension even in the more mundane parts of this movie, and added in more intense, exciting scenes to not let the audience fall asleep, especially in a movie with low stakes. That's another thing I wanted to mention. I feel like the stakes in this movie should have been higher because there's only so much that can go wrong. By the way, if anybody wants to let me know what you think the message of this movie is, let me know it down in the comments because it went over my head. I know it has something to do with morality and loyalty, but I just can't piece it all together. Yeah, it's a very fragmented film. So, in conclusion, an interesting experience that didn't really do much for me because it's lacking in substance and a real story, in my opinion. It's not hard to follow or anything, but it feels so messy, like only so much about this film makes sense. Actually, there's one more thing. There's a very clean dap up Mick and Charlie perform when they meet again, and I just wanted to mention it because it pleases the most masculine side of me. The Longshots is based on the real-life events of a football player known as Jasmine Plummer, the first female player in the Pop Warner football tournament. I don't know how significant that is in football terms, so don't ask me. Anyways, meet Jasmine Plummer. She's a smart kid, but also a loner, as she finds it hard to talk to other kids her age. Since Jasmine's mother doesn't want her kid to be home alone since she works so late, she gets Jasmine's uncle, Curtis, to look after her. At first, the two don't get along, but after realizing Jasmine could give a mean throw, Curtis tries to coach and prep his niece into becoming a football player. After much preparation and motivation, Jasmine becomes one of the best players on her school's football team, and while they do make it to the finals of the Pop Warner Super Bowl, they don't win, but that doesn't matter. The fact the team made it that far makes their whole town proud of them. This was definitely my favorite film out of the three in this video. Unlike the other two, this one follows appropriate film conventions and has narrative merit. It actually has purpose and meaning, unlike the other two Durst films. The message of keep working towards your goals, especially if you have the ability to achieve them, isn't the most unique or deep thing. I'm sure you all can think of another piece of media that conveys a similar message, but it's not so much the content of the idea, rather how it works with every aspect of the movie, and in this case, it does its job. It works with the plot by giving each character their own motives as to why they want to continue in their behaviors, and gives the audience something to look forward to. It also allows for character development, as the central theme pushes for Jasmine to break out of her shell and create new connections with people, and develop a skill that'll keep her well-rounded, and it pushes for Curtis to find something meaningful to do in his life, instead of just sitting around all day, and reconnect with his friends and family. It's more than just his family too. The whole town plays a role in this movie, as it experiences its own kind of character development where it starts off as a desolate, little quaint town, to a unity of people that give the place a nice fresh breath of air, and make it a place they're proud of. There's even a decent amount of literary elements in this film too, like symbolism. Curtis's emotional distance is reflected in how he wants to distance himself from Midden by moving far away to Miami. One of my complaints about this movie is the color scheme doesn't seem to change at all. There's only a few shots that deviate from the greens and browns of autumn time, so the movie's colors can start to wear in the viewer's eye because of that. Not to mention, colors can be used to convey certain emotions and moods. Like, the vibrant colors during a bright and sunny day while Jasmine and Curtis were practicing football could have been reflective of how the two were having fun as they started to warm up to each other. Speaking of bright and sunny days, the color scheme also stays the same when the team goes to Miami, and I'm pretty sure Minden, Louisiana looks fairly different from the vibrant environment of one of South Florida's biggest cities. This movie also moves pretty fast. Like, I think the payoff of Jasmine winning her first football game would have felt more satisfying if we were shown more of her training, or if there was more scenes of Curtis contemplating whether or not he should become official coach for the team. These could have been great at illustrating the character's motives and backstory. There's a side plot involving Jasmine's dad coming back to see her football success after being absent most of her life, and there's only a few scenes where it's brought up and developed. I feel like the tension between Curtis and Jasmine's dad could have been drawn out a bit more to add some drama, show a bit more of their backstory, and create some tension between the family to give the dynamics more depth. Overall, The Longshots isn't groundbreaking or absolute cinema, but its heartwarming and inspirational story keeps viewers interested so they can see how Jasmine finally earns her keep on her football team and how Curtis starts to get his life back together. The movie also has a good amount of narrative elements too, like the character development and symbolism seen throughout. So, I will recommend it for a small, fun watch if you don't have anything on your watch list. Alright, one more thing. Some of you may be wondering how faithful this movie is to the real life story of Jasmine Plummer. And well, I think the director summed it up pretty well in this interview he did with blackfilm.com. Durst states, well, the true story is about the girl and her becoming the first female making it on a football team. That the Pop Warner team goes to the Super Bowl is also true. Everything else surrounding that is where the film plot gets written. Speaking of which, the real life Jasmine Plummer is a big fan of the movie too. Alright, let's move on to Durst's latest film, The Fanatic, released in 2019, featuring John Travolta. The Fanatic is a film about chocolate mousse, or just mousse, an autistic film enthusiast that wants to meet up with one of his favorite actors, Hunter Dunbar, to tell him about his love of his movies and get his autograph on a prop he wore. After every run-in they have though, Hunter continues to get more and more aggravated with Moose, as he considers the advancements to be breaching his privacy and stepping over the line, which completely shatters Moose, so he kidnaps and ties Hunter up. Like The Education of Charlie Banks, this movie is more of an experience in my opinion, due to how off the rails it is in terms of ignoring film conventions, but I do like it more than that aforementioned movie, only because this one has more conflict spread throughout, and the conflict makes more sense. Like when Moose was snooping around Hunter's house, I was constantly wondering, oh god, what's Hunter gonna do when he finds out some creep's been messing with all his valuables on his property? Now, I don't think The Fanatic is derived of purpose, but that doesn't mean its purpose is significant. I think The Fanatic tries to tell a narrative about parasocial relationships and how unhealthy it is to idolize popular figures without knowing who they really are underneath. But that doesn't really work that well in that movie because I don't think Hunter did anything that wrong to Moose, and Moose isn't a relatable or likable guy. The worst thing he did was stab Moose in the eye, and while he didn't have to do that, Hunter was scared for his life, and was even remorseful afterwards. Not to mention, 2 of the other times he threatened Moose was to keep him away from his son, who he cares for so much and is very protective of, so Hunter is very understandable in his motives and actions. The only time he did something mean to Moose was when he was dealing with his ex-wife and called off the fan meetup. And again, that event had to deal with his son, so I understood where he came from. Not to mention, Hunter's a really cool guy in my opinion because he listens to Limp Bizkit.
You like a little Limp Bizkit?
Sure.
You like a little biscuit?
Yeah.
Yeah? Listen around? I used to listen to this back in the day. This is hot. Oh my god.
Yeah, that scene I showed you is in the film, and while I know it's Fred Durst patting himself on the back, I still can't help but love it, and hold it as my favorite piece from this movie. Getting back to it, another thing I don't understand is the character dynamics. Moose has only one friend named Leia, and she helps him throughout the movie with meeting Hunter, but I don't get why they're friends. She's mad at him for a good portion of the movie. It's implied she's done multiple good things for him without any sort of favor or appreciation, and neither of them seem to have a good energy or an understandable dynamic. The only thing that does connect them is their love for film, nothing else. I don't understand why Leia keeps hanging out with Moose. Speaking of which, there's these 2 characters in the film that constantly harass Moose and try to get him to join their scummy tactics of pickpocketing people, and I just don't know why they do it. Moose profusely tells them he won't join their quote-unquote business, no matter how much they pester him. And not to mention, this is Hollywood. They could easily find another scumbag to do the pickpocketing part for them. Moose does later get these guys to get off his back by punching one of them, but I don't think the side plot really has much significance due to how shallow it is. By the way, during the scene where the aforementioned characters are performing street magic, there's this guy wearing a mask titled Serial Man, and that was definitely one of the most interesting pieces of this film. Like, where's that guy's movie? I'd love to see that, especially if it was made by Fred Durst. Another issue I have is Dora's death. Dora was one of Hunter's maids, a mage in which she starts to like romantically, and she happened to run into Moose the first time he snooped onto Hunter's property, which led to Moose ending her life on accident. This incident is not brought up again until the very end of the movie, which feels really odd. We have a homicide that not only doesn't get discovered until way later, like seriously, how did Hunter not notice the horrid smell of a carcass? Or notice Dora was gone, especially when he was starting to really like her? It just feels like this event should have had more importance when it first happens, considering how serious the situation is. But instead, the movie shows it for a few minutes and moves on. So in conclusion, this movie's scattered narrative, odd dynamics, and messy message makes this movie forgettable and without any kind of meaningful significance or artistic merit. I feel like this movie could be decent too, as Durst said the inspiration came from a similar situation where he was stalked by a fan of his work. But for some reason, Durst wanted us to feel sympathy for the stalker. Okay, quick detour here. I was mostly done with this video, then I found Durst had a short film that's only about 30 minutes long called The Truth, and I just wanted to talk about it briefly to add on to this video's content, so here we go. The Truth is a mockumentary about a group called The Truth, run by Evangelos. The film shows believers of the truth in interviews, and even includes clips of a ceremony of said group in between. The movie seems to be Wimpic's satirical parody on Crazy Evangelist due to Evan's over-the-top ceremony and the nonsense that comes from the other members. Just for the record, all of it is hyperbolic, so while I think Durst does want to make fun of Evangelist, I don't think he tried to do it in a mean-spirited way, or in a way that should be taken seriously. Forget all of that. Is it any good? It's not bad. Again, it's more of an experience than a film due to how off the rails it is, but I will say, there is a decent amount of good humor and comedic moments throughout the film. And when I say that, I mostly mean the ceremony itself and the interviews after that. Everything else really isn't that funny. There's nothing really intelligent about the jokes. Just stupid humor that pays off well due to how over the top it is and how quickly things get out of hand. Not to mention, the beginning of the film leads viewers to believe it's supposed to be nothing more than just a critique on certain missionaries, but quickly turns things around with the true stupid event. And just for the record, Fred Durst does indeed play Evangelos, and Wes Borland even played a character in the ceremony, so that to me was just really funny. I guess Durst should look more into comedy stuff. He's got a funny side to him that I think he should show more often. Okay, that's all I had to say about The Truth. I know this section was a lot shorter than the other ones, but it was a much shorter film. It felt more like a long sketch than an actual film with a plot and a message. And as I mentioned before, I didn't watch this until I was finished with the majority of this video, so I won't be bringing it up again. Alright, now that we're done with that, let's go over some of the overall flaws these movies possess to better understand why they don't work so well. First of all, Durst doesn't seem to understand how important film conventions are. Without having some kind of rules to ground the media, it will feel more like an experience rather than a movie, which doesn't work so well when the director is trying to tell a worthwhile story rather than just a series of connected scenes, if that makes any sense. A good film should have some kind of central theme or message, so it has purpose and can connect with the audience in some way. It gives the movie a platform to stand on. Just to be clear, this theme doesn't have to be completely unique or something no one's ever thought of before. It just has to be prominent and understood. The Longshots message was to keep working towards your goals and to never give a good thing up just because of what others might think of you, which I'm sure a lot of you watching have heard in a bunch of other pieces of media before. Yet that film is the best out of Durst 3 because of how it uses this message to create character development, a solid plot, and a satisfying conclusion, among other things. Charlie Banks' thoughts about morality seem half-baked because, while Mick may not be the worst person in the world, he's still very much a degenerate. Because he was never given a proper punishment for what he's done, it means he'll continue to be that way until he's given proper punishment. The Fanatic was halfway there with this message, but its poor execution of character dynamics, not giving the audience much of a reason to root for Moose, or a reason to go against the antagonist, it fell short in trying to tell an effective story about parasocial relationships. Another thing about all three of these films is that they all have a popular actor as one of the main characters, and don't get me wrong, good acting is important to a movie's quality, but I feel like this was done in order to get people to see these movies rather than providing a worthwhile cast. I'm not saying the casting's off or anything like that, but I'm sure they could have gotten other actors that aren't as popular as the ones prominent in these films, and they could have done nearly as well. I think these films are also kind of forgettable. Usually once I'm done finishing a TV series, a movie, a video game, whatever it is, it usually festers in my mind for a few days at the very least. Yet I hardly thought about these movies after I was through with them. Not to mention, the only time I really thought about them was for this video for obvious reasons, and I didn't have too hard of a time conjuring up most of my critiques for it. Well, that's all the Fred Durst movies and what I think of them. Really, the only film worth a damn is the Longshots. The other two are just weird pieces of media that fail in delivering a worthwhile movie. Now, technically speaking, these aren't Durst's only directorial pieces. He also directed a few eHarmony ads, but I don't really feel the need to go over them. You know, I feel a little bad going so hard on these movies, considering how proud Durst is of them, and how nonchalant he is about them. I've seen a few videos regarding paparazzi asking about his movies, and he's very chill and calm when dealing with them, so maybe I'm the one in the wrong here. Also, I know I mentioned this in the intro, but Durst says it's not about making a profitable movie, it's about creating a memorable, timeless film. Although, I'm sure one could make a good movie without having to invest millions of dollars into it, but hey, what do I know? Well, that's all I had to say about the Fred Durst movies. Let me know what you think about them if you watch them in the comments down below, and have a good day.